In my last video, I talked about getting laid off twice, back to back, after a very long career. I talked about what that broke, what it forced me to confront, and how quickly experience stopped protecting me. This video sheds more light on what came after that. Not the win, not the turnaround story, but the actual rebuild while I was still applying for jobs, still doubting myself, still going through the imposter syndrome, still trying to work out what I was supposed to do next. And more importantly, what I do differently today, knowing what I didn't know back then. If you are rebuilding right now, this will probably sound familiar. Let me be clear about something. I didn't wake up one morning with a plan. I didn't decide to pivot. I didn't suddenly feel confident. Some days I was applying for roles, other days I was questioning whether I even belonged in the market anymore. Most days it was a little bit of both. I was constantly rewriting and editing my CV. I was changing my headlines on LinkedIn, toning things down, then sharpening them again. I was having numerous conversations, but every single one of them um, seemed to focus on me explaining the layoffs instead of talking about what I could actually do for the role. That's the headspace I was in when the rebuild started. The first thing I rebuilt was identity. What broke wasn't income, it was how I explained myself. I remember people asking, "So, what are you doing now?" And I would hesitate, not because I had nothing to say, but because nothing sounded right. Former title? Sounded a little bit defensive. Consultant? Felt premature. Between roles? Felt like a downgrade. So I stopped trying to label myself and asked a simpler question instead. What do people actually come to me for? Not on paper, in real life. And the answer was always the same. They come to me when things are messy, when systems and processes don't work, when teams are stuck, when decisions keep dragging on, when they need advice on personal and professional level. That became the anchor. What I could still do regardless of who employed me. So the next part was visibility. This part wasn't strategic at first. I started writing because staying quiet felt riskier than being visible, so I started making notes. That's the honest reason. I wasn't trying to build a brand. I wasn't thinking about becoming a content creator. I just realized that if everything I knew stayed in my head, it might as well not exist. So I started explaining on paper how I think, how I approach problems, why certain decisions fail, why others compound. Some of it landed, some of it didn't, but at least people could see me again. And after being laid off twice, being seen matters more than people admit. Next thing I tried to rebuild was to start recognizing what actually was changing. Around that time, I started noticing the conversations were changing. People weren't just asking what I'd done before, they were also asking how I thought about what was coming next. And one pattern kept showing up: AI, or as we call it, artificial intelligence. Not in a hype way, not in a replace everyone way, but in a more quiet, more operational way. I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't just another tool cycle. It was a shift in how work gets done, especially in roles that rely on judgment, prioritization, and decision making. So instead of ignoring it or, reacting later, I started paying attention early. Not to become technical, not to chase trends, but to understand how it would change, how teams operate, how decisions get made. How can I use it as a vehicle to make my life and work more efficient? So basically to my advantage. And and what experience still matters when parts of execution are automated. That became part of the rebuild too. Not as a reinvention, but as a way of staying relevant on purpose instead of by accident. The next thing was optionality. At the same time, and this is important, I was still job hunting. I hadn't given up on employment. I just didn't want it to be the only door left. So I started having conversations, advisory chats, short engagements, coaching discussions. Nothing clean, nothing packaged, nothing I'd confidently call a business. Just options. And when you've been laid off twice, options matter more than ambition. So while I'm doing all this, there was a few things that I got wrong. So looking back, I can see I made mistakes in how I tried to rebuild myself. No fatal ones, but expensive ones if you consider time and energy. This is where hindsight actually helps. So the things I would probably do differently are: first one is I would narrow faster. I tried to be too useful. I said yes too often, helped across too many areas in my career, solved too many different problems. It felt productive, yes, it felt responsible, but it blurred the signal. If I were to start again today, I'd narrow aggressively. One problem I solve, one group of people I tend to solve those problems, and one clear outcome. Not because I cannot do more, but because clarity travels faster than competence. The next thing I would do differently is package earlier. I stayed in conversations for too long, calls instead of frameworks, advice instead of assets, explaining instead of defining. Part of that was caution, part of it was confidence lagging behind the experience. Today, I'd package my thinking earlier. Not perfectly, just clearly, because if your value only exists in conversations, it disappears the moment attention shifts. One other aspect that I would look differently was to show current relevance sooner. This one is uncomfortable, especially if you are a senior employee or a senior leader. I underestimated how fast the market moves on. Past wins fade. Titles expire quietly. No one owes you recognition for what you did 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. Today, I'd make current thinking visible sooner. Not louder, not flashier, just making sure it's unmistakably current. Because experience only counts if people can see it in action now. That's the truth. Just to clarify, this isn't a contradiction of the last video I made when I spoke about my 2 consecutive layoffs. That video was about the collapse. This one is about the mess that followed. The rebuild didn't start as a strategy, it started as survival. Only later did it become intentional. And that's normal, even if no one says it out loud. If you are in that place right now, I hope this video has helped you. I hope it has helped you recognize yourself and then move forward with fewer blind spots. Thanks for watching.